What is user testing? Is it just the users checking and accepting the system? It can be, but what users test and how they approach the challenge needs some consideration. It's not the same as acceptance testing because customers can always deem any test as part of the acceptance process. So how do users actually approach testing? What are they trying to achieve? How do they satisfy themselves a system actually works for them? Now, we encourage users to take a business view and test as if they're doing business, of course. But I have to say that independence of users and the way they test is of incredible value to our projects. So it's critical to understand the difference they make and the value they add. If we're going to talk about user testing, we should get ourselves a definition. But I don't think there is one that's ideal, I have to say. I looked around and there is a definition of user-based evaluation, which is, I think, a broader activity. But that's useful to us because I think it's worth discussing in those terms of a broader set of objectives, if you like, for user testing, and certainly a different way of approaching it. This comes from the IEEE and ISO standards, and it's a long-winded kind of definition, so I'm not going to explain that right now, but I'm going to go through the key terms, the key aspects of it in turn. The first aspect about user testing is it's about performing tasks. The users will try and do their job using the system under test. Now, the system is usually designed to support specific tasks, and we might capture these tasks in terms of use cases or user journeys or the business process, if you like. Now, whereas system testers check things against requirements, typically, and might use system use cases that reflect the way the system has been designed, users try and complete their assigned tasks and make observations and recount their experience as well. They take a slightly different tack in they may be performing a task using the existing system to be replaced, and they do it many times a day. So they will come at it from that perspective, looking for opportunities to do it better, let's say. Now, while users are actually using the system and trying it out and testing it, they're going to raise usability issues. It's almost inevitable. It's such a big issue nowadays. Now, usability might not be the goal of your user test, but people will know if the system works for them. It might perform the functional requirement as defined, but it might not work very well for them in their context. They know when they get back to the office it's not going to be as easy to use as it might be in theory. So usability, accessibility and other aspects of the system become more important, critically important, in some applications, that's for sure. Now, in the broader aspect of evaluation, we might be measuring other aspects of the system like efficiency and effectiveness, and might literally be timing the transactions that users are actually executing to get their job done. And there's soft and fluffy things like user satisfaction, which there might become some kind of post-test survey to gauge the level of satisfaction they've got. But experience is a very nebulous thing, so we can't really take that much further in this definition. I might come back to it in a later video. Now, the users themselves have to be representative. Now, what does that mean? Well, they need the right perspective. That is, the tasks they're undertaking to do on the new system when they test it, they should be pretty familiar with already, using the old system or doing it manually, whatever is involved. So they have to understand the tasks in hand. And in order to get the right experience, if you like, to understand what the experience will be for people in the real world, in the real business that's going to use this system, they've got to have the right experience and level of ability as well. You can't just swap independent testers in to do the user's job. You can get so far, but you lose quite a lot of that perspective. You know, users have the right kind of cultural background, and by that I mean the business culture itself. If you've ever worked with people who work as share traders in the stock market, compared with architects who work in an office, very different perspective on the system and the software they use. So I want to talk about kind of the difference between what's done before user testing and then what user testing is about. The levels of testing between component integration and then system testing, this is usually performed by the suppliers of the software. Okay, and these people tend, even if they're independent testers, independent of developers, they're coming at things from a technical perspective, and by that I mean they're looking primarily at the requirements to show that the supplier has met their contractual obligations. And that's the thing, even if you're working in an agile project and the supplier is providing the technical expertise to deliver your system, there's still an aspect of contractual obligation to follow user stories and so on. Now, user testing is different because the users will look at the system through the eyes as a user, as adopter in business of that software to do a specific job. So in their eyes, requirements are kind of secondary. They might be written down and contractual, but that's not really their priority. They're really much more concerned about how they experience the use of the system to do meaningful business activities. Now, some experiences can be recorded as requirements. So, to say things are usable and, flexible and adaptable and so on. You might be able to document these, but a lot of this experience, it's a human, cultural, emotional kind of response to how people are using the system. So it's tough to define these in any meaningful way in requirements. I mean, you can quantify some of these things in some ways, but at the end of the day, it's a human experience that we're trying to evaluate here. Now, many years ago, the folk who work in the high integrity arena, primarily in larger waterfall projects, separated user testing from the rest, let's say, by calling the supplier testing verification, mostly about demonstrating the system has been built in the right way, according to specs, let's say. But users don't take that view. They look at it and say, well, we don't care how the system was built. We need to know whether it's the right system for us, the right product for us. So this notion of verification and validation is quite prominent still in those circles in the higher integrity arena. But it's been recognised forever in software development circles that the role of users in testing is quite different but very valuable in our projects. Let's look at it from the perspective of requirements themselves. This image came from the previous video I did on system testing. We can look at all testing required as some kind of imaginary quantity or list of things to cover. But what users test when they're doing their user testing, it doesn't seem to be a very good fit. An awful lot of what they are really looking for and possibly complaining about if things aren't going well, they're outside the scope of the requirements. Now, why is this? Well, the testing required, you could say, if all our tests are derived from requirements, we're going to miss an awful lot of the aspects of the system that users are going to be most concerned about when they get their hands on the system itself. So it's clear that the users go beyond what's in requirements. Now, contractually, this can be sometimes quite tricky because if it's not in the requirements, it's not contractually obligated for the supplier. And so user complaints about usability might not easily be addressed. But at the end of the day, if it's not usable, it can't be acceptable to the business who are going to pay for the system itself. Now, I have to say that independent users and testers come at the problem of testing in a different way from developers. They bring a different set of experiences, preferences, and their biases to the testing they perform. Now, the value of this is that because they come at testing from a different perspective than the requirements, they almost always find problems. They expose failures and bugs in areas that might never have been considered by people who are looking purely at the requirements. It's inevitable. And it's always good advice to independent testers to say, think like a user if you can, and you will see things that are maybe not visible if you're not looking for them in a regular test approach. Now the question remains, is user testing the same as acceptance testing? Very often they are one and the same thing. But I want to suggest that an acceptance test is not necessarily a user test. It could be a system test or a component level test. I'm going to talk about acceptance testing in the next video and just differentiate, and so you understand the different perspective of acceptance versus user testing. If you want to know more about the concepts I'm talking about in the Glossary of Terms videos, it will probably help you if you take a look at the Leadership in Tests online class that I created a year or two ago. It covers some of the topics in more detail and obviously provides more of a structured approach to explanations of the concepts, and also gives you some idea of how to do some of the things that I talk about. I hope you can take a look at it and get value out of it. The link is below, bit.ly/leadintest.